It was on August 17th, 2016 at 4:05 p.m. that I watched my mom take her last breath. It was 3 months later that my father was short of breath and he went to the hospital. And while there, I'm sitting in the chair beside his hospital bed, and the doctor comes in and she sits at the end of the bed and she looks at me and she says, "So it's my understanding that, you all have had a rough couple months." And she said, "I really hate to say this, but your father's kidneys have completely failed, and we'd give him about 4 weeks to live." So throughout that duration of time, it was really interesting because it shifted the way that I saw God, the way I saw my theology, the way I saw ministry. Throughout that period of time between August and December when my dad died, and between the time my parents died, I literally canceled all my preaching engagements. I think I did maybe 2 in there, and that was only for favors, last-minute favors and emergency situations for some of my fellow friends in the ministry. But outside that, I canceled everything because, think about it, I got my whole entire life knowing this God who gave, right? And then at the drop of a hat, I literally met this God who took away. And to me, it seemed like he was taking away in such an unfair place. And so I struggled even finding that place to pray, because keep in mind, the same place that I was to pray from was the same place that I'd already prayed that God healed my parents, but he didn't heal them in the way I thought they should be healed. And it was the same place I prayed that God wouldn't let me lose either one of my parents, but they both still died. It was the same place that I prayed that God wouldn't let me lose my parents so close together, yet 17 weeks apart, just 4 months, I lost them both. And so during that period of time between August and December, literally, when it came to praying, I literally could not even form the words to pray. I would just say Jesus. Like, so in the morning, I would just say Jesus. And at night, I would just say Jesus. And I found myself in a really, really uncomfortable place, especially after my dad died. I literally remember the morning after Dad's funeral, I remember walking into the kitchen area, and my best friend was in there, and I walked to the window and I looked out and I asked her, I said, "So what am I supposed to do?" And Rebecca responded and she said, "Nothing." And the truth of the matter is, I didn't know how to do nothing. Those of you who know me know I'm always doing something. I'm trying to take over the world here. Yet I was supposed to do nothing, and I felt so out of control. I felt like I was free falling. Just all of my plans and desires in life, they were just in this really ambiguous place, because I didn't even know this God that I just knew that I had known for so long. And so it is that Christmas, Rebecca and I, we just went to Miami to do nothing. And so I remember it was on Christmas night, we had this this little terrace with furniture upstairs in our hotel room. And so I went up there and I just sat, and I was looking over downtown Miami, and it started off with me saying Jesus, and then it actually turned into a more formal prayer. And it was through this prayer that I started expressing to God how angry I was at him. I was angry with God. I resented God. I just started voicing my frustrations to him, and tears were just falling down my face as I was telling God, because the truth of the matter is, what I had to learn was that I had been mad at God ever since he took my mom back in August, but I felt too Christian to tell God that, right? I was so worried about being a bad Christian that I was taking in the whole world. Everything happens for a reason and everything's going to be okay. And although that's true, God has a plan and he has provision and he has power, I wasn't giving myself the opportunity to be human, to be hurt, to be frustrated. I wasn't giving myself the opportunity to really even find that place of reconciliation with God. The next morning, so we're looking at December 26th, I wake up, and it was odd to wake up early, because throughout the time of my parents' deaths, I went through this phase where I didn't really want to wake up. I actually slept the majority of the day. I would I would wake up, I would shower, and then I would just sit. And I would try to go back to sleep as much as I could, because being asleep was so much better than actually being awake for me at that time. It was just a really, really immense pain that I was going through. I didn't really answer my phone during that time, not even responding to emails. Like, I just literally was shutting down. And so as it was, the next morning for me to wake up early, I was like, what in the world? And God spoke to me. He said, "Pull out your calendar." What? That was weird for me, because the thought of even thinking 5 minutes ahead would completely send me into tears, because those 5 minutes were 5 minutes that I didn't have with my parents. But as it was, I pulled out my calendar, because even though I was sleeping most of the time, I'm very type A. I always have a calendar. And so I pulled it out, and as I pulled it out, God started showing me things and saying, well, flip to January for this, and March for this. And I was so overwhelmed, but it was like a peace. And all of a sudden, I felt God giving me my vision back and giving me goals back. And all of a sudden, this world that was so dark, all of a sudden started opening up a little bit. A couple weeks later, January came and God put on my heart, Kiya, you need to write a blog. And I was like, God, there's no way I'm writing a blog. I don't really like sharing my emotions with people. I don't really like sharing my feelings like that. On top of all of that, I didn't want to write a blog. I didn't need people to feel sorry for me. So my fear, another fear that I had on top of people feeling sorry for me, was this notion that nobody would find it relatable. And before I know it, I'm getting about 200 to 250 readers a week, and I start getting email messages and Facebook messages from people who are saying, Kiya, oh my goodness, I'm going through a divorce, and your blog on resentment resonated with me. And then someone else saying, oh, my dad just got diagnosed with XYZ, and I know what it's like to watch a parent die. And so all these people are finding encouragement through this blog, and I'm like, what in the world? And God spoke to me and showed me that this blog was so much more than about someone feeling sorry for me. It wasn't about that at all. Instead, through the language God gave me, it was giving other people language about humanness and how to be human in everyday situations, because unfortunately, too often in Christianity, we don't give people the opportunity to be human, right? Instead, when we go through things, we say, well, everything's going to be okay. It's going to get better. Well, yeah, it's going to get better. And yes, God has a plan, but right now I'm losing it. And so as a result, the blog was giving people opportunity and language to feel the way they really felt. It was giving them an opportunity to be human, and not just feel human, but it was showing people how you feel human and put your humanness at God's feet and allow Him to really reconcile those feelings and create this notion of healing in their lives.
Met this wonderful, beautiful, vivacious creation because of a principle that I believe is how life is geared. Love. And love takes time. And not knowing that God was writing our love stories, putting things together in a way that only He knew and we could imagine. At the time I started reaching out to her, I had no idea she was going through the things that she was going through with her parents being deceased. I saw someone that really caught my spiritual attention, and I reached out to her and just talked, but she brushed me off. She absolutely brushed me off. I know why now. You know, I thought my charming, good looks and my wit would connect with her.
Perhaps I should say, so I don't date people who hit me up. Like, if you hit me up online, it's always, thank you for your kindness, take care. I have this thing, like, I will not meet someone on the internet. There are people who do, and more power to them, but the thought of meeting someone on the internet that wasn't gonna happen. So twice I just said, thank you for your kindness, take care.
She did, and but I was persistent, and the third time is a charm. And as I said, love takes time, and sometimes it takes time to creep into someone's heart. I had her attention though. She knew I existed, and that was all that needed to happen. And so she started writing her blog, and I started reading her blog, and started to really get to know her. And this blog exposed me to her in a way that I'd never seen anybody so vulnerable and so open, and it just really kind of drew me to her in another kind of way. And so I started seeing her in a different light. And it was weird because, you know, I didn't know her. I did not know her at all. She was just another beautiful child of God, roaming the earth like me, but I saw something different in her. And so I sent her a message one day, and I said, how are you feeling? Because I genuinely was concerned about how she was feeling. I'd read her last blog, and I really thought she didn't have any friends. I really did. I was like, you need some friends, and I'm a friendly guy.
I have friends.
I'm a friendly guy, and so.
What was really interesting was the day you hit me up. That day, the interesting thing about it was that was the worst day I had had since my parents died. Like, that day, I remember I was sitting on the couch, I was literally crying, I was screaming. I mean, it was terrible. And then I just kind of come up for air and happened to like look at my phone and see this like, how are you feeling? And I was like, fine.
And 9 hours later, we're still talking on the phone. We text the entire time for 9 hours, from evening to the next morning, I think the sun came up on us.
And that was weird for me because remember, throughout the whole time of my parents' death and following it, I didn't like being awake. I woke up to go to sleep. And so this was odd because it was the first time since my parents had died. So we're talking about the first time since my August, and this is now February. We're talking about for the first time I actually wanted to be awake.
My birthday was on the 27th, and she was like, I want to see you on your birthday. I was like,
I did not say I wanted to see you on your birthday.
You know you wanted to see me.
I did not say I wanted. He told me, he said, I am hesitant to meet you, and with my anointing of a smart mouth, I said, that's a good idea when you think you like somebody not to meet them. That's what happened, because George was everything I said I didn't want. So for starters, he was a pastor, and my thing is, if I'm a preacher and he's a preacher, what are we going to talk about? Number two, he was divorced, and there was a stigma around that for me. He had a son. I didn't know if I wanted that. He is a Kappa. I didn't want to date a guy who was in Greek life.
I woo her, I want her. But I also told her something that I've never actually said or even thought that I could even do. I told her when we met, I said, when we meet, I'm either going to like you and I'm going to marry you, or it's not going to work and I'm never going to talk to you again.
He did. He absolutely did. And I remember being like, oh, okay. So the first time I saw him, I mean, it was just like, okay, you know? And so, you know, he greeted, he brought flowers.
More than that, you felt more than that.
When I first saw you, it's just like, okay, you know, he looked like his picture, that's a plus, you know? But again, like, I'm going into this, it's not like pre my parents' death where I'm going into this like, oh my gosh, I'm meeting a potential suitor. No, I was in a season of loss. I was used to losing, you know? And so it was like, okay, here we go.
So I walked up, I pulled up to the house, and the house is empty, but there's a front door, glass door, and the inside door is open, and she's standing at a window across the room. And as she's standing at the window, I have flowers in my hand. She doesn't know that I'm at the door, so I stand at the door and I just look at her for about 30 seconds or so. And I just look at her and I ring the doorbell, and she just, it's kind of like that little movie thing where it's like, it was like orchestra playing, and
you heard the music?
People playing all kinds of hanging from chandeliers. It was just, I was just like, whoa. And when she turned around and she came, I was like, yep, that's it. I hadn't spoken to her. I just saw her, and I just knew, I felt that I'd never wanted to be without this feeling ever again. And I knew that this connection was something greater than I'd ever believed. I didn't believe in soulmates, and I, to a degree, don't really believe in them now. But I believe that when I was formed and fashioned in 1982, he was thinking about 1987. And when he formed and fashioned her, he was thinking about 1982. When I was born, and I think God was very intentional about putting us in together at this time.
It was within a week or so afterwards, and again, there's this moving whereby I can tell God's doing something, and I know He's different, and I knew He was it. Like, I knew, they say you know, and I know it sounds crazy, but I knew He was it. And so I also, though, again, I'm used to experiencing loss during this time, and so there was no way I was going to say anything. So I was just chilling, honestly. And so he ends up, one of the days he calls me within the following week, and he just, in this conversation, he says, you know you're my wife, right? And because God had already told me, so I was like, you know, and we just fashioned ourselves intentionally after that. It was intentional. It wasn't games. We already knew that we were going to be celibate until marriage. That was something that was very important for both of us. We were intentional, and that type of intentionality for me was refreshing.
Yeah. We were also very intentional about me not being a coping mechanism for her, and a way out of her pain. So we talked very intently and extensively about what she was dealing with, and how it was affecting her and how it was affecting me. And we were very intentional about it not being that. I asked her to come with me to New Orleans for the weekend, and we had separate rooms.
We did, and we were very, again, for our intentionality. We hear couples all the time saying that, oh, want to be celibate and it's so hard. We're not saying it's easy, but we're saying we were very intentional about it. So even in talking, as we reflect on like how we knew, there was actually our celibacy that allowed us to be clear-minded enough not to be distracted. Not to be distracted by things that would have kept us from really seeing each other or seeing each other's heart, and really keeping the sexual part and the intimate part like in this corner under, you know, submitting that to God, allowed me to see George's heart.
New Orleans was so fun. I don't know if I've ever had this much fun, man. It was just, we flew there, we sat together, we got there, and we just laughed. We cut up, we gut laughed, we cried. We made up stories about people. It was super fun, and that experience kind of solidified the knowing for me, to be able to experience life with someone and so freely and fun. You know, when being in church all the time, you really have to be kind of serious, and you have to be, you know, on point. And so it was just really refreshing to have somebody who understood the dynamics of church and ministry, but also was able to have fun and enjoy life. So I finally told her that I loved her. We were just sitting on the couch. I was like, yeah, I love you. And she didn't say it back.
I didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
Like, you know how you just ladies, you just don't know.
Yeah.
So when he said it, I remember I was like, oh.
Yeah, so she didn't say it back. I was geared to leave because I was going to take it back.
Whatever.
But anyhow, she didn't. She ended up telling me that she too loved me.
And I did, but again, you're in that state of fear. You know what I mean? Again, everything that was connected to me, I was losing. So the idea of bringing someone on like George, it would be awesome, but at the same time, there was this fear inside of me, like I can't lose again. Yeah. And that's what that's what I was scared of. But I'm grateful because it was a big win. One of the things in learning each other that I learned was all of those things that I said that initially I didn't want were actually things that I actually did want. The truth of the matter is, throughout life, I had been hurt by each of the characteristics that I said I didn't want, and so as a result, I had just scratched all of them off, right? And in actuality, those were things that at one point I really did want and I really did love. So instead of saying like, you were everything I didn't want, no, he was actually everything I want, but I was scared that I would never really get.
Yeah.
One of the things that I also thought was really cool was throughout learning each other, I learned that George was one of the first men who actually knew how to talk to me. So I remember one day something happened and the next day we're talking on the phone and like we're just chilling and talking on the phone, and he says to me, he says, Kiya, I said, what? And he said, aggression doesn't look good on you. And no one had ever talked to me like that. And so I remember just being like, excuse me, you know? And then we just keep talking, and I'd never been talked to like that. Another time was, I remember one time, there was a car that almost hit me on the interstate, and I called George. George's car was coming in my lane, and I'm like freaking out and everything. And then all of a sudden, I get this silent, and George says, babe, I'm like, what? He's like, I'm really glad you're okay. So he has this way of talking to me that just puts things into perspective and just kind of calms me down and balances me out, and it's just, it was nice.
Yeah. And I think we balance each other well, and that's why I want to marry her, because she balances me. She doesn't complete me, and I don't complete her, but we complement each other, and that's the most important thing, that we are able to help each other through life. And it's not just about being a first lady
or a first gentleman,
whatever. But it's about being first to one another.
We are excited. It's just so cool to be able to grow together with someone and ministry with someone. And for me, it was cool because, again, I told you, I knew the God who gave. I met the God who took away, but now I can say I met the God who restores. I met that God of restoration, not just through the personhood of George, but also through Mason, also through this God who restored my joy, this God who made me more excited to be awake than asleep, because my reality is better than any dream. That's a quote somewhere, I think. Nonetheless, it is my reality, and I am so, so grateful for our God-written love story.
So join us February 17th, 2018 for our wedding. We'll be at the Bennett Chapel in honor of her mother, who was the provost there, and it's going to be awesome. So see you there. Love you guys. Thank you so much for watching our story.
Bye.